The flames of the underworld burned around, enveloping the entire sky. Previously unseen creatures from the underworld greedily ate the bodies of dead people who gave their lives for the right to exist on this earth. In the agony of hell, one single breath of a man, the last man on this earth, is heard. The demon king pierced him with a Hikari blade. And already rejoicing at the victory, he said. Now the era of people is over and the time has come for the end of the world. And this is where the story should have ended. But this is only the beginning of a great confrontation between good and evil. A man named Jeffer, bleeding from the blow of a demonic blade, stood with his last strength. He was not ready to die, not avenging the murder of his family, and indeed of all mankind as a whole. He was bleeding, his mind was slowly becoming cloudy, but his hands tightly gripped the sword. I am not ready to die, I am not ready to die, Jaffer kept repeating. At this time, the gods were watching what was happening. They did not interfere in this battle, since they considered themselves to be higher creatures. Although they depended on people worshipped them, filling them with heavenly power. One of the gods was struck by the stamina of Jeffer, his perseverance, the strength of his desire for life. The gods should learn from him, one of the gods thought to himself. And he decided to risk his life and help the man. At that moment, there was a strong roar, a bright light, dazzling power hit everyone in the area, and time stopped everything around. All hellish creatures froze. What is this happening, said Jeffer, and then God appeared in golden armor that blinded his eyes. He was much taller than a man. And God turned to man, you are the first who bothered me so persistently, amazing persistence. I praise. Although they say that one who fights without any chance of winning is stupid. And those who surrendered, fearing the strength of the enemy, are not wise. They simply fools. Jeffer lay motionless, clutching his sword in his hand, his mind slowly growing cloudy. He kept repeating to himself, I'm imagining it or not, I'm imagining it or not. God looked around, there were only corpses of people and scavengers eating them from hell. God said, I get even angrier when I see such a weak and impatient trash. You will surely understand me, because you are the strongest of people. So I want to offer you something. Come over to my side. Let's leave this dirty land and conquer others, including the realm of the gods. You're in my strength. Jeffer understood that he was dying, and in order to take revenge, he needed strength. Jaffer was silent as he pondered the god's offer. Jeffer asked him, if you would really take me with you. God answered yes. Jaffer agreed. God touched him, filling him with divine power. His wounds began dragged on, his mind began to come to his senses. God gave him half of his strength, and it was very difficult to keep this strength in an ordinary human body. For this God created an armor for him that keeps the balance of strength. Jeffer got up and felt the power of the God, the energy of heavenly power, flowed through his veins. His new sword was as light as a feather and as strong as the strongest metal. God told Jaffer, now you are my equal, you and I will conquer new worlds, and all the gods will be at our knees. In response, the man remained silent, his eyes filled with blood, they had a thirst for revenge. You watched how they destroy all people, we worshipped you, made sacrifices, and the answer is you just watched us get killed. God was surprised by this response of man. You are not a grateful little man, I endowed you with strength and made you equal to God, and in response you tell me this. I'll kill you. Jaffer took out his sword and said. No, you won't, I'll kill you all to the last. With a lightning strike of the sword, Jaffer cut the god in half, his power passed to Jaffer. From a large influx of power, Jaffer lost consciousness. Waking up, he found himself in some kind of room, more like a temple with large statues. These statues looked like gods that people worshipped. Where am I? Jaffer asked himself. Is it really in the underworld? Although no, there are statues of heavenly gods. Perhaps I was in the abode of the gods. Jaffer was at the lower level of the pantheon, in the same abode of the gods. A place where only a god can enter, only one who has the power of a god. Jaffer began to explore this temple, looking for some clues, since there was not a soul around. Suddenly, a bright light appeared, from which a female silhouette with wings began to appear. It was a truly beautiful girl with 6 wings. She was wrapped in white tunic, on her head was a shining wreath. Jaffer, frightened, wanted to get his heavenly sword, but he could not draw it out. There is nothing to be surprised about here, Jaffer, said the goddess. I'm here to convey the will of the gods to you. My name is Mercedes, I am the eldest of the angels. You died because of the murder of a god, your body and your mind could not withstand this force. Following the procedure, I am obliged to send you to hell, however. You killed the god of war, who wanted to destroy all the gods in their abode, so. Due to the persistent requests of several gods, the 3 supreme gods decided, send you to the past. Jafar asked in bewilderment what that meant. You will go to the past with all the memories you have and the power you have received. This means that you have a chance to change the ending of the battle on Earth and save the human race. Jafar furiously began to turn to the angel when demons killed people by the thousands, when people prayed with all their hearts. The gods cut off contact with people, and now you are giving me such a chance, I cannot understand. Or so that I do not kill you, or you are an angel, you speak the truth. Mercedes told Jafar a great story about the creation of the world, gods, demons and of people. And she explained that in order to keep the balance, the gods and demons should not interfere in the human world, but such times have come when the demon king decided to take over the whole world. Jafar began to speak again in a rage. It means that the gods want to see more spectacles, how people experience despair, in general, have fun watching how people again find themselves in hopelessness and die. The angel answered. No. Jafar, calm down. To the gods that turned their attention to you, it is a pity that you died. No mortal has been able to achieve such greatness and power that you have. You rarely meet a person who will go so firmly to the end when only death awaits him ahead. Who is the battle with numerous monsters that you have been leading for 5 years? As mentioned, it was very interesting. Many gods were upset if everything ended very quickly, so they were watching you. Remember, towards the end you are more and more lucky. So the gods helped you until you paid for. Jafar interrupted the angel, shouting, you ripped us off, you didn't help us. All my family and my relatives are dead. We fought it desperately because we wanted to live. And you say it was interesting, fun. You gods think I fought to please you. With a spell, the angel summoned a bright deafening flash that blinded and calmed Jafar. The gods are watching us, be polite. I think you misunderstood me a little, I'll get better. When the gods were talking interesting, they were only talking about you. They are not interested in people as a race. It's simple, if you prove your worth, you will receive everything you want as a gift. It can be something personal for you or for people. Doesn't matter. After all, you always have to pay for everything, right? The angel said to the man. Jafar had no choice, he wanted his family back. He agreed. An angel opened a portal of the past for him. The demon king conquered not only the earth, but also many other worlds, mercilessly incinerating every centimeter of the new earth and the new world. His scavengers mercilessly devour everything in their path. Upon learning that the last of the people was returning to the past by the will of the gods, infuriating the demon king, he was looking forward to a new fight with the little man, but he did not suspect that he now had the power of a god and the support of the heavenly abode. Jafar stood in front of the portal and spoke. These gods may be hideous, but chance is chance. I use it for revenge. Not only to the demon king, but to all the gods that have abandoned us. Taking up the sword, he entered the portal. There were some kind of glowing unknown inscriptions in divine languages around. They changed shape, changed the power of radiance. Following, Jafar heard the voice of an angel. Good luck. Around the darkness, a conversation is heard. Jafar opens his eyes and sees his colleagues from the Legion. They were trying to bring him back to consciousness. Seeing that he opened his eyes, they turned to him, a beginner. Open your eyes. He realized that he went back 10 years. By that time, they had not yet been sealed by such a strong brotherly friendship, but this is the time when everything began. Jafar began to weep with joy and embraced them. And they looked at him like he was sick. Go to work, we told you. Jafar understood that there was no point in explaining to them, and they would not understand anything. Working in the mine as an ordinary worker, having divine power, Jafar worked non-stop, not feeling tired. The other workers and his future friends were at a loss. How he works like that, you can immediately see that he is a hard worker. Maybe we'll take him to our team. But if we take it to ourselves, then we will have to plow in the same way. Jafar enjoyed working around people, he liked working next to ordinary people. While working in the mine, Jafar had an overseer. When he saw that Jafar was standing, the overseer came up and began to shout. Work? Why are you standing? Do you want to get a whip on the first day? Swinging, he wanted to hit Zephyr, but he caught the whip with lightning speed. The overseer was surprised that an ordinary worker caught his famous whip with his hand, with which he punished the poor workers. Having finished the working day at the mine, according to the rules of the mine, the best brigades were chosen, which collected more coal, and food and money were divided between them. In this way, they interested the workers, gave them an incentive to work, to be the best. The warden began to say that the first place was given to Jafar's brigade. He alone pulled out the whole brigade, working all day without stopping. The whole brigade was at a loss because usually they took the last place and then a newcomer came, and on the first day they get first place. Today they will be full. The other brigades glared at Jafar angrily, planning a massacre. The warden said. According to the rules of our mine, the money and products of the last team are distributed between first, second and third place. After the end of the distribution of seats, they began to pray to the goddess Arya. She was the goddess of light, one of the three supreme gods. O almighty Arya goddess, save us all with your eternal light. Oh, great Arya, save us with your eternal light, the people repeated. On the continent, among the three great deities, the goddess of light, Arya, is worshipped the most. After the evening prayer, everyone went to bed. Jafar's main task was to gain freedom and pay off the debt at the mine. In those days, people were having a hard time. And in order to survive, to feed their family, they had to work hard. On the way home, all the workers went to the local fair. They usually drank ale, music played. It's quite nice to decorate the day after hard labor. Jafar wanted to go home. He had no time for it, but his brigade persuaded him to go with them to treat his beer and to thank for winning first place. How long have I not heard people's laughter, Jafar said. Around people danced, sang, enjoyed the evening sunsets. Still, life is good. Jafar's team thanked him because before they had only taken the last places, and thanks to him, they got the first place, received monetary rewards, food and privileges among other work teams. The next day, they started working again. Jafar understood that he needed to get out of here, and working at the mine, he would not be able to pay the debt and begin the mission of which the gods returned him. At this time, a strange sound was heard in the mine. This sound was incomprehensible to people, but Jafar realized that it was the sound of a monster. Jafar went to the mine and said that a strange sound was heard from the mine and the hunters needed to be called. Jafar said he was taking them. Monsters are creatures spawned by a magical flow from the underworld. All of them are aggressive, ruthless, and pose a great threat to people. And although during the entire time of the war, these creatures caused enormous damage, their appearance was a small help for humanity. Magic stones and crystals inside the bodies of monsters, as well as skin and bones, served as an excellent material for creating weapons and armor. Therefore, at that time, monsters began to be considered as a valuable resource that can be used for the benefit of mankind, for their protection. In other words, each mine, inhabited by infernal monsters, is fraught with both great danger and great profit. The hunters arrived in the mine. They were wearing medium-grade armor. Their weapons were made of monster crystals. Hunters are slaves with martial skills, selected specifically to deal with monsters. The price of their work is as high as their risk of being hunted, and the success of a mission is often gives them extra pay. Jafar decided to become a hunter's escort since he worked in these mines and knew them like the back of his hand. He approached the hunters and offered them his services. The hunters laughed, how it was a worker and would still be their guide, the more they would have to give their part of the money. He convinced them that he knew these mines from A to Z, in this way he would save them from unnecessary troubles. They agreed. Jafar gathered the necessary things. Having prepared, he and the hunters came to the head to get permission to carry out the operation. Jafar could see at night, which was a big plus, since the mines were pitch dark. Entering the dark side, Jafar summoned his magical bullet. Magic pulse sharpens perception due to the released energy. These skills are a must if you want to get into the lair of monsters unnoticed. A month later, after this sweep, Jafar was transferred to the hunters. Now they no longer laughed at him, seeing how he kills monsters with lightning speed. All this time, Jafar was a monster hunter. With his team they overcame many mines, abandoned deep tunnels, long roads that lasted weeks, all this for the sake of revenge on the Demon King. He mercilessly killed monsters. In the watery small town where the hunters were passing with Jafar, they were asked to participate in a reconnaissance group to find out the number of monsters in the mine and then form a hunter squad. Jafar agreed. Having passed a couple of kilometers of the mine, he heard the sounds of demons and without waiting for reinforcements, he struck them with his sword. And so the glory of Jafar began. They began to call him the hunter Jafar, and already in other cities people knew about him. For about 3 years, Jafar was a hunter. He taught his team skills that not every hunter could do. His team became the most demanding in clearing monsters. One summer evening, in a town that was on the outskirts of the continent, people began to lose their livestock. Residents began to complain that monsters crawl out of the abandoned mine at night and eat their livestock, and the drunken Renai, who fell asleep near the farm, was eaten, leaving torn pieces of clothing. People were in a panic. Jafar agreed to help these people. Entering the mine, he saw the excrement of a monster. He mixed them with the fruits and leaves of Actindia. You can get an attracting smell for monsters. The smell becomes strong for monsters, and they can smell it even from 100 meters away. By doing this, they counted on a small number of monsters, but there were kobolds. These are monsters that live in swarms, like ants. But the trap they had prepared in advance saved them. In advance, Jafer ordered to dig a deep hole and at the bottom of the hole to set up spears, all this they covered with branches and leaves. And it seemed that all the monsters had died, but a barely perceptible sound was heard from afar. The hunters realized that this was not the end of the swarm, there were still a lot of them. They decided to go deep into the remote, abandoned branches of the mine. There were not enough of them to fight with swords against so many monsters, they needed to come up with some kind of trick. The hunters went deeper and found a narrow passage through which they could hold a large number of monsters. It was decided to fight there. Jafer took out a rare potion that lures these creatures. Having prepared, they started the fight. It all lasted about 3 hours. The monsters attacked and attacked one after another without stopping, but the hunters gave a worthy fight and repulsed. Going further, they found the remains of skeletons. At first they thought they were the skeletons of wild animals, but after looking better they realized that these were the remains of kobolds. What kind of creature that eats monsters? The hunters were surprised what kind of terrible monster could live in these tunnels. For the hunters, it was a riddle that they had to solve. Going further along the tunnel, the hunters went out into a huge cave. There was not a soul in it, but Jafer began to suspect something. It was strange in such a place, and there was no one. This is the most convenient place for collecting monsters, but there are no souls. And suddenly huge stones began to fall from above. A terrible cry was heard from the darkness. It was a creature that no one had seen before. Huge, 20 meters high, long tentacles, like an octopus. It was immediately evident that this monster was hungry and he wanted to feast on the hunters. The battle began. With one stroke of the tentacles, the monster literally glued everyone to the wall. Hunters. Jafer summoned a magical shield that was supposed to withstand the monster's blows, but it was so strong that even the shield could not withstand the blows. This monster was called a traitor. He ate his relatives. Creepy and bloodthirsty creature. From his screams the ground cracked under his feet. Jafer took out his sword, summoned magical power, the air swirled around him, runes began to glow on the sword, he was ready to deliver one fatal blow. To do this, he had to wait a moment. Jafer, looking out at the monster, noticed that it did not have a part of the protective scales. Apparently the monster had lost it somewhere in the battles. He realized that this was his only chance. Jafer separated from the group of hunters so that the monster turned all his attention to them, bypassing himself, pierced the heart of the monster with a lightning strike. One of the hunters remembered a story that the elders told him when he was still young. Years ago, when a nearby village was attacked by an adult traitor. He ate people bloodthirsty. The villagers watched what was happening without even blinking their eyes. It was all because their bodies were consumed by fear. Their bodies are just numb. They couldn't even close their eyelids. It was a terrible story that is still remembered to this day. After killing the monster, it turned out that there is another one. He heard the death cry of his relative and broke through the wall of the cave to the hunters. He was much larger than the previous one. He was like a titan. This time he had no weak points and Jafer had to figure out how to kill this creature again. Jafer remembered that along the way he stopped by his old friend the alchemist, who had developed a poison of very strong action. Even this monster could not resist this poison. Jafer took the spear from the hunter, smeared the tip of the spear with this poison, picking up the right moment, pierced the monster's throat with it. The monster was burned alive by a blue flame. A deadly poison virile, made from the most common herbs by medicine, falling into the blood vessels, it spreads throughout the body and burns the internal organs in a matter of seconds. After the end of the battle, Jafer could not stop. He madly finished off the dead body of the monster with his bare fists. He just beat and could not stop. The hunters were frightened when they saw this. Someone even thought that he had lost his mind. The hunters began to take him away, Jafer said. One more blow. They took him away from the body of the monster. Jafer was covered in blood, only bright blue eyes could be seen from all over the bloodied silhouette, and this was truly a very terrible sight. After a short rest, Jafer began to think. Back 10 years ago, I lost everything I could be better than this monster. There is no power, no magical energy. That's why it had to be done. One plus was from the recovery potion. If you drink a lot of it, a magic skill appears and an increase in magic mana. It is clear that if you drink a dozen bottles, then a strong effect will not happen. However, if you have this special ability, then things are quite different. The hunters saw Jafer's desire, his perseverance, how he never gives up and always brings things to the end. They believed in him and were ready to follow him to the end. Jafer, without the help of hunters, quickly gained recognition from other hunters and people. At this time, at the entrance to the mine, scouts were waiting for them. They set up a small camp and waited for the hunters to come from the mine. Suddenly 2 silhouettes appeared in the distance, one huge man with an extinguisher. A quench is a knife attached to a chain or rope. Only a skilled craftsman wields such a weapon. The second silhouette was under a hood, more like a priest. They approached the camp with unkind faces. The scouts started shouting at them. "Stop. Who you are?" In response, only silence. As soon as they approached the scouts, a huge warrior took out an extinguisher and cut them all with one movement of his hand. And the priest began to utter some incomprehensible words in another language. The priest said that the scouts were servants of the devil, and 7 people died. They burned their entire camp to the ground. After Jifer and the hunters cleared the mine, they returned to the guild to collect a reward for the monsters and give the trophies to the temple. Usually crystals and other inventory from monsters were given to temples, where they studied and prepared weapons for killing monsters. And in the Guild of Hunters they received a monetary reward. Clearing the dungeons of monsters every quarter and the total number of battles can greatly increase the likelihood of promotion. Despite the fact that the dungeons can be the usual lairs of kobolds. Since we are a group of hunters, we had a lot of fights. In this regard, I want to ask for a raise for our group, said Jafer. However, if a couple more optical hunters join our group, we will quickly clear everything without outside help. Jafer remembered why he went back in time, and he remembered that in a month a major event was to take place, a large-scale raid of the Temple Knights was to take place, in the process of which they will find an artifact that will shake the entire continent. Jafer needed to get into the raid team in any way and get his hands on that very item. To change the future, Jofer had a plan. Since he was in the guild, he decided to crank it up. In doing so, he is at great risk to his reputation as a monster hunter. There was a large crowd of people in the next building from him. They were standing in line. It was the supply department. They sent 2 hunters from their team to the infirmary, and he told one to go to them and check on them. Standing on the street in the guild were 2 strange people, one warrior and the second monk. It turned out that they were authorized by the Inquisitor of Heresy. In fact, they were also slaves, but in direct submission to the Inquisitor. All the people dispersed to the sides to clear the way for them. It was evident that they were respected and instilled fear in all hunters. The hunter told Jeffrey they are not just slaves and they have great privileges, so it's better to treat them like big shots. Under the pretext of heresy, these bastards have the right to kill without warning, saying that we were minions of the devil. The hunter said that he heard how there were cases when they cut people just because they accidentally pushed them with their shoulders. The most repulsed of these 2 Saka, he is called Mad Dog. Rumor has it that he started working for the Inquisitor for one reason: he just enjoys killing people. If he starts a fight with someone, he always goes to the end. He is ready to cut his throat, very ruthless and bloodthirsty. Jeffer, be careful with him. Suddenly, one of the Inquisitors turned to Jeffer and said, "Wait, are you wearing a miner's uniform?" Jeffer silently stood and looked into his eyes. All the people around dispersed, thinking that now there would be a bloody mess. But the Inquisitor saw in Jeffer's eyes the fortitude. He realized that this is a true master of his craft. The Inquisitor decided to test him. Jeffer was cheeky with him. Jeffer was surrounded by Inquisitors and subordinate guards. The Inquisitor began to ask if he had heard anything about worshippers of the demonic god. Jeffer said he knew more about them than anyone else. They are the followers of the demon god, that same demon king. People who worship him call him Tartaros. They are traitors to humanity who will lead us all to defeat in a great war. However, now they are known only as heretics, hostile to current religious order. They have some differences from all other people. The Inquisitor turned to Jeffer that he should conduct an interrogation, since Jeffer looks suspicious and his every extra word or action can be used far from him. Jeffer suggested changing the place for such a warm conversation, since there were already a lot of spectators gathered around. Just God forbid if something happened to the confidant of the Inquisitor, he would be in an uncomfortable position. A duel began between the Inquisitor and Jeffer. They were surrounded by other Inquisitors, creating a magic circle. In this circle the Inquisitor had stronger speed and hitting power. Jeffer decided to apply a secret fighting style that none of them knew. The Inquisitor was surprised by this style and then scared because he didn't know what to expect from him. Jeffer was persistent. His strikes were razor sharp, lightning fast and precise. Jeffer deflected all of the Inquisitor's magical blows with ease. Repelling the blows, Jeffer decided to strike a warning blow. His fist was near the face, the Inquisitor, but he did not want to stop. He took out his sword and began to swing it. Of course, that this did not save him. After all the Inquisitors in the magic circle began to attack Jiefer, they realized that their brother would lose if they did not intervene. Jiefer landed his signature kick. Steel strike. The Inquisitor almost spat out all his teeth. He realized that jokes with the Jiefer were bad. When he tried to get up after such a blow, he could not. And then a huge warrior, the Inquisitor, entered the duel, waving a flail. Jiefer fought off these blows. He was ready to go to the end. He didn't return to the past for this to die from a bunch of some religious fans. Chains shattered from blows, stones scattered in different directions. Jiefer dodged these blows, waiting for the moment to deliver a mortal blow. Jiefer fights off absolutely all blows. Truly a great warrior. All the hunters that watched this fight began to support Jiefer. They realized that he was not afraid of them. They began to scream, "Jiefer! Jiefer, we're with you!" And suddenly the mad dog used a magic skill. His chains wrapped around Jiefer's hands, blocking his defense. From behind, one of the Inquisitors stabbed him across the back with his sword. Attacking Jiefer, they began to use magical skills because in a magic circle, the strength of the Inquisitors increases by 80%. Jiefer concentrated all his mana, and with a magic spell made an explosion, breaking the chains, and knocked out the Inquisitor who wanted to stab him again with a sword. Jiefer began to replenish his mana with the monk's technique to fight a huge warrior called the Watchdog. Having replenished it, Jiefer began to glow blue. He was ready for a duel, and he understood that this duel would be difficult since the Inquisitor's warrior was very strong and well trained. Jiefer became stronger and faster many times over, thanks to the mana he regained. When Mad Dog struck, Jiefer pulled out the chain and redirected the blow at the Mad Dog, knocking him down in one hit. Everyone around was dumbfounded. The Inquisitors realized that they had no chance. Jiefer turned out to be a great master who knows many martial and magical techniques. They all stood in bewilderment and remained silent. A mysterious man was watching from the window of the building. He said only one thing. "I cannot believe it. Was it sent by the same person?" All the people watching what was happening were in shock, and voices were heard from the crowd. "How is that possible? What just happened? He defeated Saka himself. Mr. Saka lost." After all this, Jiefer decided to go for a walk to unwind a little. After all, he had an unequal duel. Moving a little further than the guild, he saw beautiful landscapes, mountains, green grass, blooming flowers and gardens. This started to calm him down. Suddenly, he sensed something. Turning around, he saw that shurikens were flying towards him. He dodged and froze. His whole body felt a sharp pain and impotence. He couldn't even move a finger. Jiefer realized it was a mana freeze. Mana freeze is a condition that accompanies paralysis and severe pain throughout the body and appears when magical power is completely depleted. In short, he had asthenia. This is a psychopathological condition characterized by severe weakness, increased fatigue, rapid exhaustion, and poor tolerance of physical, mental stress. After using techniques in combat, his energy was used up much faster than he expected. Really 10 years ago I was such a weakling, even with an increased mana threshold. Jiefer asked himself. Suddenly, some incomprehensible portal opened near Jiefer. Time stopped around. Jiefer stood in bewilderment. From the portal came an entity that looked like a masked man, her clothes as if it were an extension of her body. The entity introduced itself. "I am a member of the family of Lord Urs, the great god of debt. It is found that your amount of magical user power is at 0. I need to collect the Iron Wall skill." Iron Wall is not just a skill that increases defense and stamina. Its true essence lies elsewhere. Fatigue and damage received from the use of skills, accumulating, turn into debts in a certain sense. And at the moment when the level of magic reaches 0 at a certain moment, the damage accumulated over the entire time returns to the user at a time. Countless adventurers tried to make this skill convenient for themselves to descend into deeper dungeons, but in the end, they all met with death. A double-edged sword that the god lowers, devouring the despair of people mired in debt. With a heavenly mechanism, the entity began to measure Jiefer's debts, and it turned out that Jiefer had spent all his mana. The verdict of essence was 1. Death. Starting the countdown from 10 to 0, the entity began to invoke death agony to fulfill its plan. Jiefer at this time began to be attracted to the ground like a magnet. His body gradually became heavier and heavier. It was more and more difficult to move his limbs. Jiefer was not ready to die. He began to think about how to beat the essence, and he remembered that there was a small amount of a restoration potion in his sleeve. He took it out and drank it. After drinking the restorative potion, Jiefer received the first level of magic. It turns out that the essence cannot kill him. She just said, "We'll have to postpone the debt procedure until the next time." Jiefer was still that survival pro, and he always has a backup plan. After all, Jafar was able to live a whole year, one, after the extermination of all mankind. But Jafar knew that if he knew how to manage mana correctly, the iron wall could become an absolutely safe skill with the best efficiency. And Jafar stuck to those rules. And Jafar fell asleep on the grass. When he woke up, he did not understand where he was. It was a room without windows, candles were burning around, and he was tied with his hands to the bed. "Where am I?" Jafar asked himself. In response, he heard a woman's laughter, looked around, and there was a nun. This nun had loaned money to Jafar when he was having a hard time, and now she wanted to repay the loan because the time limit had already expired. Putting a knife to Jafar's throat, the nun asked if he would repay the debt. If not, she will kill him. Jafar understood that he could not use magic now because he had a very low level of mana, and if he used it, then again the essence would come for him. Jafar told the nun that he should be paid a good sum next week. For clearing the dungeon, he asked to wait for this payment and then he would pay off his debts. To scare Jafar, the nun decided to cut off his hand, calling 2 monks. They took Jafar's hand and laid it on the table. Jafar was too weak to resist. He couldn't remember the nun's name in her other life. He knew that if he called her name, it would surprise her very much. And as soon as the nun gave the order to cut off Jafar's hand, he whispered some words. The nun immediately froze, ordering everyone else to leave the room. Only the 2 of them remained. She jumped out with a knife at him and began to ask where he heard this name. Jafar replied, "How is it not to know the name of such a popular person, that is, a broker, monsters, White Rose, Temple of Light Nanana Primrose." However, she also has a second personality, namely the broker White Rose, which, thanks to connections with the inhabitants of the underworld, is engaged in mediation, conducting transactions with stolen items, equipment and corpses of monsters. The nun realized that Jafar knew her secrets, for which she could pay with her life. And Jafar decided to make a deal with her. After all, going to a dungeon with cheap weapons is a trick of the sick in the head. Therefore, it is necessary to bargain with this girl and get yourself things more serious. Jafar thought. Jafar suggested that she untie him and discuss the terms of the deal in a more suitable place. At this time, Inquisitor Saka, who lost the fight to Jafar, was lying in the infirmary. He was consumed by anger that he, the Grand Inquisitor, had lost the fight to some incomprehensible warrior. Scattering plates around the room, throwing pillows, he was furious. Suddenly, a mysterious person entered the room. Saka bowed before him. Sunbei asked to leave the sister's room. This man turned out to be the right hand of Mr. Matthias. He asked the Saka about that incident with Jafar, that in front of all the Saka he lost, and shamefully. Though he might not get there. Because of their ambitions, the Saka have had a lot of problems lately. He took a knife and slashed Saka's cheek as a sign of disgrace. Since Mr. Matthias asked not to create problems for which he would later be ashamed. When the Sakak first found the devil worshipper, everyone thought that he had a unique gift and had high hopes for him. However, in half a year, Sahak found only 2 devil worshippers and created much more problems. "Saka, the tops are starting to doubt you. How much longer we have to endure this whole circus? I still can't believe you've made a mockery of the Heresy Inquisitor's Office of Commissioners." Saka fell to his knees at Sunbei's feet, begging for one last chance. He was willing to do anything to get this chance. Sand told him that first he needs to send to the next world the one who shamed him, and only then the future of Saka will be decided. To help him, Sand gave him the artifacts of the devil worshipper for greater strength. Saki was surprised by this help, but Sanbi said, "Use or not, you decide. But right now, I don't think you have a choice. Make a decision you won't regret." After Sam left, leaving the spy to keep an eye on him so that he would not accidentally do stupid things. Meanwhile, Sahak took out the devil worshipper orb to gain demonic power. But in fact, it was not a demonic sphere, but a smoke bomb. Sam thought of something very dark. Thanks to Saka's rampage, the commander of the Knights Temple squad lowered his guard. Sam planned to secretly infiltrate the raid of the Knights squad and steal artifacts from them. Then, between times, eliminate the commander himself inside the dungeon. And, in the end, the 3rd diocese of the Temple of Light will pass to us, into the hands of the worshippers of the devil. Sam had a middle name. Ned Strayer. He was a diligent disciple of devil worshippers. For them, this was an important mission that would further strengthen the influence of their diabolical order. Ned Strayer decided that they shouldn't have any problems in their path. He assigned a subordinate detective to find out about Jafar. He interested him. Jafar in battle used the military equipment of their sect. And this technique is owned only by the teacher and students. Maybe he's an assistant sent by the teacher, then why didn't he contact us through the official channel? It's all strange, said Ned Strayer. In order to find out everything well about this person, we use Sakaha. If it suddenly turns out that the stranger is not one of ours, we will just have to eliminate him. At this time, Jifer and White Rose discussed a deal. After the deal, Jifer returned to camp with his team. They got food and got together to spend the evening. Still, I needed to rest. They drank a lull evening. Jaffer looked out for each of his team and analyzed, even on such an evening, he still did not think about rest. Man is a being who treats favorably the one who gives him what he wants. The one who loves wealth, money. To the one who craves fame, success. And for those who seek to gain respect, you understand. But wherever you go, everywhere there is some kind of snag, an eternal splinter. One of Jafer's team began to be unhappy that Jafer was on the same team with them. He started talking to everyone about the Jaffer, turning them against him. Most likely it was just jealousy. Jealous of the fact that thanks to the Jaffer they won so many victories, because he pulled out their team, he took the most dangerous blows on himself. And so they went to the next sweep, the village Edron Cave. Inside the rock there is a whole system of rooms, hotels, markets. This village has been untouched for hundreds of years. Previously, people lived there, people came there to be treated from the temple, or people who came on a mission. But now this place has become a lair of monsters. All rooms and corridors were covered in huge cobwebs and slime. And so Jafer and his team began to inspect the cave. Everything around was dotted with a huge cobweb. All the things of the people who lived here remained untouched. Going further, it was hard to see something, and Jafer turned on the magic skill, mana of perception. This skill will help improve the senses if you envelop your body with mana. You can also release mana to the Earth's surface. Things that are in the detection zone, emerging movements, and especially physical objects endowed with physical strength. You can feel them as clearly as they touch your skin. After doing reconnaissance, they realized that it was a dark steel spider. Jafer's plan was to sneak into the spider's lair unnoticed, pour the paralyzing potion around, wait for a while, and then calmly slaughter everyone. You need to do this during the day, because during the day the spiders sleep. One of Jafer's team began to resent, because the dark steel spider is a very strong monster, and there are only 4 of them. A monster in the form of a spider with strong iron-like skin. It has a high impact force and protection that no knife can penetrate. Moreover, due to its super fertility, the dark steel spider multiplies incredibly fast. In terms of danger, a trader does not stand next to a spider lair. Going to the log, it was necessary to go carefully. It was impossible to touch the web, as the spiders sense every vibration of the web. But one of the team accidentally touched the web with his hand and stuck to it, unable to tear his hand off. He pulled the web, and the swarm began to run. The spiders grabbed the hunter, but Jafer managed to pull him out. Jafer himself began to fight off the spiders, applying the mana of the shield. His body became impenetrable, and the spiders failed to bite to sting with poison. Next, Jafer ordered the whole team to gather in a heap, back to back, since there were a lot of spiders. Of course, a plan is a plan. None of us knows what will happen in the dungeon, so when the X hour comes, we will act like this. Marco will wrap the hammer in a cloak. Dale and Goth will also wrap their blades. You can't cut the threads of spiders with an ordinary blade, so remove the web from yourself with a weapon. By doing as Jafer said, they were able to move on. They acted according to the plan, driving the spiders into heaps. The Jafer destroyed them. According to this principle, they killed all the monsters. In a past life, Jafer often had to train unimportant fighters. And not infrequently, there were cases that, no matter how hard I tried to teach them something, I still couldn't put their brains back in place. However, this guy seems to have realized his mistake and gathered himself. You can put some hope on him. And besides, with a character like his, words hardly help. It is better to let him realize the mistakes in practice. Most likely he does not trust me, but after clearing this dungeon, he will draw the right conclusions. After resting and gathering equipment, Jafer and the team were about to leave the cave when suddenly a huge spider appeared. It was more for the others, most likely it was a spider. All experienced hunters knew that, unlike their backs, spiders have a soft belly that can be pierced. Jafer snatched a huge sword from the hunter, ripped open the belly of the spider. All the same, before leaving, the hunters decided to have a bite. Where should they hurry? It was night outside, all the spiders were dead. The hunters began to ask Jafer where he got all these skills, combat techniques, maybe he is a member of some large guild. Jafer only smiled in response. One of the scouts ran to the hunters and said that he saw another monster. Jafer said to himself, yes, how many will it be repeated? That is, no, cutting out the paws of a spider, Jafer made himself a weapon in the form of an axe. and told his team that it's all over for them today, they can go to camp. And he will kill this monster alone. The commander from Jafer's group has been in this business for 4 years. Exactly 4 years he is a hunter. During these 4 years, many of his comrades in arms died, but he managed to survive. And all this for one reason: he always bypassed a dangerous bridge. He tried to choose only the safe path, which he could easily pass, with the risk reduced to a minimum. And always obediently followed the strongest. Of course, because of this, he could not get a promotion, but what choice did he have? No one gave him protection. The team of hunters decided not to let Jafer go alone, but instead they came, so I will leave the cave together. Telling Jafer that they are going with him. He didn't resist. Having gathered and tuned in, they began to move towards the center of the cave, the deepest and darkest place. Approaching the center of the cave, they found in the large hall a whole masonry of the Queen of Spiders. Shadows immediately swirled around, most likely they were spider knights. They guarded the clutch with eggs. The Spider Queen is the owner of the spider lair. So that the queen can safely deal with laying eggs, spider knights provide her with protection. They do not leave their positions and block the path of anyone who dares to go to the masonry. Jafer, having prepared in advance, took out bags of flour and began to scatter it around the cave, namely the place where there was a cluster of pots with her queen. Then moving to a safe distance, he set fire to the arrowhead and released it from the crossbow. Hot sparks and densely packed flour provoke a chain reaction of spontaneous combustion. Such a thing is commonly referred to as a flower dust explosion. But it is clear that these creatures cannot be killed only by fire, they need to be finished off. Jafer walked away and started using poisoned arrows against the spiders. This poison was potent, it was invented by the alchemist Fader, its peculiarity, sharp pain. Jafer then told the other hunters to prepare the darksteel spider gland. If you squeeze it like a pastry sleeve, then a web will fly out of it. Their web is able to hold even the spiders themselves. In this way, they will block all the passages for the spiders. Having marked the places, the hunters ran to scatter the web, after which they had to wait outside for the Jafer. Bit by bit, the Jafer lured the spiders out for destruction. If they had stayed in the lair itself, they might not have overcome a huge number of spiders, and in this way, the Jafer stretched their chains and could freely kill them. Approaching the exit and seeing the light, the Jafer killed the last spider. He had not seen the sunlight for several days, the light hurt his eyes, and at the exit his whole team was waiting for him. Whipping for the exit, the Spider Queen appeared in the background. She was much larger than the others. She began to release poison from her mouth. The acidity of this poison is very high, but it was worth being afraid of another effect. This is a curse that blocks the use of magic skills, namely protection and regeneration. A person with a low level of protection will melt in a matter of seconds. Jafer started yelling at the hunters that if they want to live then they need to avoid poison in every possible way, by all means. Flying out of the cave, Jafer did not stop running. He wanted to divert all attention to himself. An angry queen of spiders flies behind him, spilling her poison wherever possible. Jafer then yelled at the hunters to get going, and they began to fight the Spider Queen. After first cutting off the paws, Jafer managed to turn the Spider Queen on her back and rip open her belly. But the creature did not give up and did not want to die. Jafer took all the attention of the monster. His role was the role of a tanker. The hunters, as in the old days, prepared themselves, crawling a huge creature splashing poison. While Jafer distracted the Spider Queen, a hunter stabbed her in the brain with a jade-tipped spear. Reasoning, the hunters admitted to themselves that initially they would not even dare to go against such a monster. However, everything changed after the appearance of Jafer. He motivated them. They were ready to follow him to the end. Once again, they realized that they needed to trust Jafer. After that, they began to get valuable artifacts from the Spider Queen because the monster was not an ordinary kobold, but the Spider Queen herself, and there should have been enough artifacts in it. Jafer and the crew were collecting loot for cash rewards, and Jafer had to repay the White Rose. From the Spider Queen, Jafer took only Henim. Jafer praised all the hunters and invited them to drink some water and rest while he butchered the bodies of the monsters. To which half agreed and the other could not leave Jafer without help. A unanimous decision was made to help him. Due to the fact that Jafer fought in a team, he retained a decent amount of mana. And he should not be worried that he might fall into the debt collection of the Goddess in time. Returning to the guild, Jafer went to the White Rose to repay the debt. Having roused himself, he returned the pouch of Sazality to her, where the percentages were on top. The White Rose was pleased. All this illegal trade took place in broad daylight in the temple of the goddess. However, in our time there is not a single simpleton who would believe that the temple is a place where the saints loiter. The money donated by believers is collected in mountains. And there is only one reason why the city was built next to the temple. So that the knights of the temple and the fighting slaves would destroy the monsters. As always, you have to pay for security, at least now you can buy it for money. It will soon become a problem to sell your own life for the safety of your own children. Jafar was lucky, as the buyers of the black steel spiders arrived on time, all the monsters were in good condition, so they had to be sold at a good price. After such a deal, the White Rose told Jafar that he was signed up to clean the alchemy lab. She gave him a suit and a card to enter. The alchemy equipment that Jafar requested from the White Rose is very difficult to obtain, but it can be used. At 7 p.m. everyone leaves the laboratory. From now on, you can do whatever you want in it. The main thing is not to forget to cover your tracks after these cases. It was a good option, much safer than stealing. There are always not enough hands to clean the laboratory, so Jafar decided to go there today. Walking around the temple with a White Rose, Jafar discussed possible further deals. Suddenly from behind they heard a voice that called the nun White Rose. Turning around, they saw Ned Strayer. He politely said that he had something to tell the nun. And he asked me to give him some time. There was surprise in Jafar's eyes. He knew this person in the future. Ned was the Inquisitor's confidant in the future. Among the 12 trustees, he alone is considered a trusted fighter of the first class who received the recognition of the temple itself. The nun saw that there was a special look between them. After all, Ned is the owner of Sahak, and Jafar beat him. The nun began to divert attention to herself, throwing light jokes, and suggested that Ned discuss everything tomorrow. Ned insistently said that he wanted to ask something important. Over a cup of tea, he invited Jafar to join their conversation. Jafar stopped the nun, going point blank to Ned, who asked him, "By the way, you are familiar with Arsaka, aren't you?" An aura lit up between them, as if it were a struggle between good and evil. Even the nun did not believe it, this magic seemed to pierce her skin. So powerful energy. Jafar and Ned almost started to fight, but the nun prevented the fight by using the slave brand. The brand of a slave is a slave mark that the priests of the light leave at their discretion within the limits of authority. And the priest can force to obey the one on whom he has branded. Angry, the nun slapped Jafar to bring him to his senses and calm down. She told him if he knew where to be at all, in such a place one should not make noise. So it's not right, you need to teach up, okay? Follow me, the nun told Jafar. She said that Ned, her toy, she uses it for personal purposes. And if Jafar lays a finger on him, she'll turn him into a chop. She asked him if it was possible not to respond to the provocation at all, that Ned really dangerous. The nun's hands were still shaking. He is a first-class confidant, the most intimate. And it also means 100 he is very strong and no one knows how he fights. Everyone who saw it is already resting under the lid of the coffin. "Oh Jafar, I'll die of worry and your constant adventures," said the nun. "If something happens to my book of income and expenses, I will definitely go to the forefathers. Send. And when you bring money, please don't die in the process. Be very careful, I can't protect you outside the temple." But Jafar said that it could be considered just a warm greeting. If that guy was going to really do something, then you wouldn't even have time to intervene. Since he has shown himself, then the preparations are already over. Jafar also had to hurry. And he went to the lab. Jafar asked the nun for another request. At this time, Ned, having come to his senses, felt for the first time the power of the stigma. It's much worse than he thought. He recalled how his teacher wanted to send him to the temple. He wanted Ned to go to the Temple of Light and become his slave. For Ned, it was a stigma. He could not understand the teacher, what it was for. He turned to the teacher, saying that he knew what hatred he had for the priests. But the teacher explained that the two devil followers who dressed up as priests to keep watch were persecuted. Checking priests intensified. And those who have not yet been revealed are avoided risky actions. This method will no longer work. However, there is still a way out. Priests of light do not watch over slaves branded with light. They think that printing is enough for control. The teacher suggested taking advantage of their miscalculation. He told Ned to brand, enter the temple, and then steal the reward from the raid dungeon. Master knew that only a Ned would be able to fulfill this mission admirably. The priests of light will never know that we have found a way to disarm the stigma. However, this cannot be done now, you need to wait until the time comes, and after, vile priests will pay for everything. At this time, the workers were rebuilding the fence. During lunch, the workers gathered to have a meal. Having gathered, they began to complain that every half a month, the fence breaks and it needs to be rebuilt every time. But what about poor areas like ours? We will not constantly pull protection from the temple, and therefore we have to rebuild ourselves from what we have. Damn monsters. Suddenly someone from the temple came to them. It was the Inquisitor. The workers asked him what he was doing in such a misguided backwater. The Inquisitor asked how many people there were in the village. He was told that there were about 50 people. Picking up some kind of whistle, the Inquisitor began to blow into it when suddenly a purple glow appeared from behind his back and huge magical hands began to tear the locals apart. As if he called on the power of hell. "This is my new power," said the Inquisitor. He was filled with revenge. He wanted revenge on Jafer and was ready for anything. In the lab that Jafer went to, there was a temple-light laboratory. New weapons and potions were created there to fight monsters. Jafer was well versed in the potion and how to brew it. Having collected the necessary ingredients, having boiled it correctly, he succeeded in brewing poison number 61. One of the poisons of the Fade King. In conversation with the White Rose, Jafer warned. If Ned's henchmen intervened, there will be a fight here, so he asked her to help in this matter. White Rose offered her room briefly. After all, she promised to protect Jafer from the temple. After all, if Jafer is the end, then the nun will burn out instead of him. They were connected. And since the White Rose understood this, she had no other choice but to agree. Jafer tried to cut the stump, but he couldn't. It was as strong as the Arcanum tree. In order to cut, the weapon did not help Jafer. For this he used military equipment, making a lightning strike. He cut the stump into chips. The White Rose asked why he cut the log so finely. Jafer replied that the wood chips would play the role of a needle. The needle is a medical device common in the East. He soaked the needles in poison, leaving them for 10 minutes. This thing is absolutely simple. It is a substance for weakening and killing. But who could know that after the invasion of hellish creatures and the seizure of power by the gods, people will begin to rely on poisons. After the needles were saturated with poisons, Jafer pricked himself with one needle. Veins began to blacken in his body. The nun, frightened, wanted to help Jafer by running up to him. But he stopped her. Before that, he warned the White Rose not to do so, that she would not help and not lose consciousness. All 72 Fade poisons, depending on their concentration, can become completely different substances. If you correctly calculate the degree of concentration and cause the effect of resistance, poison becomes medicine. It is a medicine that can raise combat skills beyond the limits. But the whole problem is in their combination. The two yanas cause acute pain and changes in the body. After hellish pain, resistance also falls. But in order to make a stable potion, Jafer lacked the skills and materials. Therefore, there were no other options. Next, Jafer applied an Oriental yoga technique in order to endure the pain. He made a small celestial circle. In this position, magical power circulates through the body. And by controlling the flow of magical power, you can heal damage inside the body. By driving the energy of magic in a small circle, in this way the Jafer gives resistance to the poison in his body. If all goes well, Jafer's skills will reach a new level. But if nothing comes out, his body will fall apart. But it's okay, it cannot be called agony or severe pain. Compared to what it was when humanity was on the verge of extinction. The nun noticed that the color of the veins began to return to normal. Jafer said that he might not be able to move, so the nun would have to monitor his condition until he gave her a sign. Into the marked places on the paper, she will need to stick needles into his body. And so Jafer told her to start. Taking poisonous needles, she began to pierce the marked points one by one. The nun was very worried not to miss, because if you stick it in the wrong place, Jafer may die. At this time, in one of the villages, huge monster birds were chasing people. The hunters, running away, swore at a reconnaissance detachment as they said that there only one nest, but it turned out that there were many nests. More than a dozen monsters were chasing them. The hunters fired a flare to come to their aid because it was unrealistic for them alone to cope with so many monsters. They ran towards the temple. One of the hunters was grabbed by the monster, then the second hunter was grabbed. The temple was about 5 kilometers away. Even with good visibility, the journey will take up to 12 minutes. Only one hunter remained. He ran with all his might. But the monsters overtook him. Surrounding him, the hunter realized that his end had come. One of the monsters began to attack the hunter, who began to fight back with a shield. He started screaming for help. Suddenly, a bright column of light appeared. The hunter could not understand what it was. From this column of light, the image of a man could be seen. It was a Jafer. He was charged with magic and power to the maximum. The monsters began to attack him, but Jafer dodged their blows with ease. Jafer grabbed one monster with his bare hands and twisted his neck. He tore them apart with his bare hands, tearing off their heads along with their spines. There was great power within him. There are 12 monsters left. Jafer began to fire magical force at them, punching through their heads and their bodies. The hunter lay on the ground and looked at the Jafer in disbelief. Jafer was like a god, easily tearing monsters apart with your bare hands. Jafer asked the hunter where the dungeon from which these monsters came from. The hunter showed him the direction. And Jafer went there. Having come to his senses, the hunter regretted that he had not warned Jafer what was waiting for him in the dungeon. However, Jafer was gone. He promptly disappeared. Of the 7 hunters, 4 died in the dungeon, and of the 3 that managed to get out, only 1 hunter survived. The dungeon is very dangerous. Suddenly, their dungeons were heard explosions, screams of monsters. From there, a bright red light appeared, which shone like a column up to the sky. The hunter looked in bewilderment, repeating how such a thing is even possible. Jafer came out of the dungeon, carrying the head of the monster leader behind his back. It was a monster twice the size of the others. Jafer felt his body light. His skills have grown somewhere in 2.5 times. Efficiency was on the face. If Jafer picks up the right gear, then everything will go like clockwork, he thought. He just had to figure out where and how to get these equipment. Then the hunter fired a green flare, which meant that the problem had already been solved and help was no longer needed. At this moment, the Sahak, mired in the magic of the sphere, wrapped in demonic power, chanted. Very soon. Very soon. A few days later, there was a discussion in the temple about how Jafer cleared out the monster's lair by himself. It was said that one slave, alone, cleared the nest of black basilisks. And he finished off the 30-meter creature guarding this brood. Everything coincided, both the testimony of the survivor and the results of the cleansing site. It turned out that this slave had been actively hunting lately when there were 20 days left before the raid. I think he wants to get into the raid group. It is worth interrogating him and finding out if he is a devil worshipper," said the senior inquisitor of heresy of the 3rd District of the Temple of Light, Matthias Gramer. But the commander of the detachment of knights, Lucius Giornetti, said to leave it and not touch it. "But if we don't find all the devil worshippers in our ranks before the raid begins," Matthias said. But Lucius interrupted him and said, no matter how carefully the investigation was carried out, they would not be able to find everyone. It would be better if this guy was one of them. I would like to see a person in the raid who can be used. Matthias, not understanding the intention, asked in what sense. Lucius said 100 followers of the devil would never reach the main creature on their own. They are just scoundrels who are engaged in theft. Therefore, it is better to take them with you, use them to find the main lair. And then kill everyone along with the creature. Matthias turned. Sir Lucius is commander of the security team of the raid team. Although no, as your old friend, I repeat that I am against this plan, as I have already said. In response, Lucius began to laugh. I knew that you would start to complain, so I will only show you, my friend. Down to the bottom of the temple. He opened a huge door, there were divine artifacts in the room. Spear of Light and Mikkel's wing shield. Lucius found them after spending a third of his fortune. These are legendary items that Matthias has only read about in books. Lucius said that they would finally finish the dungeon, which they had been storming for the 11th year. Lucius will be unbeatable in this raid. At this time, Jafer's team, having woken up after drinking, barely warmed up, went to the training ground. There were a lot of people there. They couldn't understand why so many. But one said that there are a lot of people because of the raid. They say it will be in 2-3 months. And everyone wants to show what they are capable of. As they approached their room, they saw a nun come out of it. The hunters were very surprised. Entering the room, Jafer was sitting there. He sat putting on the ring. The hunters were surprised where he got such a ring from. He said it was given to him. It was an unusual ring. This is a purity ring. It increases magic resistance and enhances the wearer's energy circulation. The spell can be used once per day. Liberation from the curse. Jafer was pleased with what the White Rose had found for him. The White Rose heard about this ring from informants on the black market. Assassin's Guild. Called Persephone. These legendary mercenaries are poison-enhanced and trained in deadly combat skills. They knew how to kill and they did it damn well. Suspiciously high professionalism in hunting and strengthening skills with the help of poison. Now everything converges. The nun thought Jafer was Persephone's assassin. A few years ago, Persephone fell apart due to an internal conflict. However, there are rumors that frequent customers, high-ranking officials and aristocrats continue to search for survivors of Persephone with their poisons. These people are the best killing force. for which money bags are ready to give a fortune. Now is not the time to take 3 pennies commission on monster trades. Once such a chance has turned up, then the nun should take on such a client as Jaffer. To start gear, the nun promised to find the best equipment. Jaffer realized that the White Rose had misunderstood him. He thought that if White Rose spread such rumors about Jaffer, then that guy would definitely come to him. Then the hunters began to ask where he came from in such a relationship with the nun. They were shocked that Jaffer and the nun had a close relationship. Jaffer turned the conversation about the dungeon as someone knocked on the door. Opening, there was no one there, only a letter, in which there was an order to urgently go and clear the dungeon. Having considered the order, it seemed like it was official, but the hunters could not understand who was transmitting orders like that. There was the seal and signature of the head of the hunters. Jaffer took this letter and began to examine it. Yes, indeed, the signature of the head of the hunters. But Ned's emphasis. Jaffer realized that Ned had sent him an invitation in this way. He decided to go there alone. Jaffer went to the dungeon. 20 days left before the start of the raid. The dungeon into which they descend will not be very easy. Tomb of the Deadly Princess. One of the 8 great problems of the world. These are huge ruins of the ancient kingdom of Media. Due to the complexity of combat, this dungeon has been stormed for more than a decade. And yet no one managed to get close to the main beast. That is why the selection criteria are so high. It should be a group of hunters that takes at least the 5th place of the outgoing year. Jaffer understood that no matter how hard his team tried to climb to the 5th position, they would not have time. So Jaffer decided to use Ned. He is a slave to the Inquisitor of the Heresy Matthias. If he cheats on Ned and gets a recommendation, then he will immediately get into the raiding group. Ned, entrusted with the mission of such a complex cleansing, simply cannot ignore the master of exactly the same martial arts. Jaffer thought Ned's hands were itching to test his technique. Is he a reliable ally sent by the teacher? Or a criminal who stole the sect's military equipment? CHN ran at an unusual speed and appeared suddenly. Ned said it was an epic appearance. But Jaffer realized that it was not Ned's voice. It was a Sahak. Jaffer was surprised and told him to go home because he didn't have time to play with him. Sahak looked crazy. He told Jaffer that all these 10 days he could not forget Jaffer. The cut on his face that Jaffer left hurt every night. It didn't take a day for him to sleep like a normal person. Sahak said that now Jaffer will see his new power. When suddenly Jaffer slapped him. Sahak fell from the blow. Jaffer thought Ned was cold-blooded and wouldn't test him with just one Sahak. Jaffer was sure he was hiding someone else. He told everyone to come out, he would fight everyone at once. But in response, there was only the laughter of the Sahak. Suddenly, he called on the power of the sphere. Demonic power began to appear from the earth. It was like a resin that glowed purple. In this resin there were many eyes, mouths with sharp teeth, and hands with huge claws. Sahak said that he would tear him to pieces, he would kill slowly, so that he would suffer as long as possible. He ordered the creature to devour the Jaffer, and it began to attack him. Jaffer was surprised that the Sahak was able to take possession of such a creature. He was surprised where the Sahak had taken her. It began to attack, but Jaffer skillfully evaded the blows. This creature was the living weapon of the followers of the devil. That's what, and he did not expect to see this creature. Shoggoth is in the sphere, but when he hears the sound of the whistle, he begins to wake up and exit the sphere. It is not affected by physical attacks. The Shoggoth becomes stronger by absorbing the magic of people it eats. This creature is. It can be called frightening, but the worst thing about it is the pollution of the soul. This influence begins to occur only from one touch to it. You begin to feel fear and see hallucinations. When the level reaches the limit, you become possessed. A person who has fallen into a state of possession completely loses control over the mind, starting to attack their own allies. It's the right weapon for indiscriminate killing. This monster was created by the followers of the devil to skillfully kill their own kind. Jaffer told the Sahak that he was already crazy about this weapon and he could soon die. These red eyes have already proved that the Sahak will soon reach the point of madness. And then Jaffer used the ring that the nun gave him. He used the spell to suppress the curse. Having cast a spell, the being left Jaffer. He approached the Sahak and took him by the throat, saying, "Before, I was only concerned with saving my own skin and the lives of my people. I thought it was obvious because the world would end anyway." However, at some point, Jaffer began to visit other thoughts. How things would have turned out if his team had more people who know how to fight. Or what would happen if he rallied a little better with other surviving people. Then the dear people of Jaffer could live a little longer. Sahak looked at Jaffer and could not understand what he was saying. Why is this at all? Therefore, in this life, I decided to save everyone I can. And give a chance to become stronger to those who want it. Jafer asked the Sahak if he even knew how many people he had fed the creature. Looks like there are about 100 here. How many more people have to grow old for the sake of his entertainment? Jafer denounced him, saying that he had no right to life for such deeds. He began to deal crushing blows to the Sahak. He hit Sahak with a special technique. He hit very fast, lightning strikes, with magic energy, then with such a speedy attack, lightning starts to appear. With the help of a drop of blood, in the east, everyone was afraid of this technique, calling it the cry of a dragon. With an atom, he dealt a secret thunder palm strike. The burnt body of the Sahak lay on the ground. A bolt of lightning ran through his entire body. He deserved such a death for killing innocent people. Because a Shoggoth cannot be killed by a physical attack. It can be killed with fire, lightning, and divine power. It's good that the Shoggoth is not large in size. One more hit and the monster will die. However, Jafer no longer needed to spend mana. Jafer played the Shoggoth death chord on the weapon. In this way he breaks the magical connection, connects the cells of the Shoggoth. Suddenly Ned appeared. Having said, "Oh, you know this song. This is the secret song of our devilish cult. Even the information bureau of the temple does not know about it." "You know a lot, friend," said Ned. Ned, who was entrusted with a mission that cannot be failed, will not miss a man who has the same techniques as him. If Jafer cheats Ned and gets a recommendation, he will immediately fall into a group of raiders. He can't wait to test me. Jafer thought. Finally, this moment has come. Jafer must pass the exam and make Ned believe him that he is supposedly a follower of the devil. That's the only way Jafer can change the future. And a spiritual debt that he could not return in a past life. He wanted him to meet a different end this time. To do this, Jafer needed to get close to Ned and then deceive him. Ned told Jafer that he had been watching him all this time and came to one conclusion. Jafer must be destroyed. From all of Ned's attacks, Jafer dodged, to which he was very surprised by his technique. Jafer was not only able to repulse the attacks, but also began to advance. In this continent, only a few people can surpass his sword and speed, including a teacher. It turns out he used a different method. Jafer said it was not right to attack an unarmed man with a blade. Ned threw away the blade to prove his superiority in strength and technique. They engaged in hand-to-hand combat using magical skills. Ned attacked Jafer with a punch like a thunder palm. Causes a lightning bolt around the body due to a high-speed strike. This gives you tremendous strength and speed. However, people from one place have a way to resist such a reception. Royal Tiara Flow secret weapon, floating clouds. There are yin and yang electrical currents. These streams are attracted to each other. However, identical streams tend to repel each other. It's a defensive technique. Ned matched the blows to the flow of yang energy, repelling all attacks in this way. Easier said than done. In such a short moment, I landed blows whose speed is even hard to follow with my eyes. Ned realized that Jafer was not a fake, he was a true master of arcane fighting techniques. He realized that he was not dealing with a simpleton. However, this made him even more confused. Only Ned and the senior student inherited the secret technique. "Who are you?" Ned asked Jafer. "Ninth in the hierarchy of the followers of the devil, a child of the east. Qin Liang, he is the dragon of cold. A man from the east who crossed a diabolical zone called the Sahara Desert. A place where no man can go. He passed from the eastern to the local Islan continent. Wu Rankliang, who had risen to the position of a member of the leadership of the devil cult through martial arts techniques, had a stream of royal tiara. There were two direct students. Heirs who were able to know the depth of technology. Unlike hundreds of other ordinary students who studied martial arts only superficially. The first student is the teacher's own son, Qing Gang, who is also a mighty dragon. And the second pupil from the continent is Aslan. This is weak. In order to know the depth of technique, two direct students are needed. There is no need for more. Because the innermost truth of technology must be carefully hidden. Ned shouted that he did not see Jafer's face even among ordinary students. And not only that, he's destroyed precious property of the Shoggoth cult. To whom, for the sake of the upcoming raid, 100 people were fed. Ned didn't even know if he was a follower of the devil or not. Jafer said. That apparently the teacher did not tell him everything. In fact, there were not two students. What happens if one dies, then the second will not be equal to learn the depths of technology. A busy teacher cannot guide the remaining student in everything, and it takes a long time to nurture a new, direct student. Jafer said he was a shadow apprentice who was raised for Ned's death. Shadow apprentice is a reserve apprentice who, according to a long tradition of Eastern warriors, Even in secret from those in the community, prepare in case something will happen to the official followers. This is a hidden card, which, in an emergency, will continue the inheritance so that the strength of the clan does not break. However, if the official follower remains unharmed and then takes the place of the teacher, the shadow student is destroyed at the hands of the teacher. This is done in order to avoid the unrest that would result from leaving a shadow apprentice alive, because he received knowledge of the same level as the official follower. It's true, it's all true. However, the true disciple of the shadow cannot arrive at the temple until the raid is over. Because Alter and her comrades tied his feet. Alter, you are probably doing something absurd even now, not a match for the princess. Jafer decided to take advantage of this situation. If you're telling the truth, then your existence is a closely guarded secret, Ned said. Why then did the teacher send you here? I already contacted him, and he said that he did not send such a student. Even though I lied about contacting the teacher, had he been a fake, he would have come up with some ridiculous excuse. It's not so easy for the devil's followers entering the temple to communicate from the outside, Ned thought. At such a time, it is right to talk about the situation already at the scene of action. And if the slightest suspicion visits me, I will have to get rid of him. Jafer said that he was originally ordered not to get close to his followers. The devil, and hide your true face. Join a raid on your own. I'm your replacement on a mission if anything goes wrong. Ned asked Jafer if he knew what his mission was. Jafer said that he should steal the dragon's heart. Inside the dragon is a magic stone called Dragon Heart. This is the best stone that gives you the power equal to the power of the dragon itself. It is said that a long time ago, 1,000 years ago, the evil princess Juridica for the first time in stories found the heart of a dragon and then took it with her to the grave. Thanks to the lightning-fast flow of the royal tiara, the knights of the temple will never be able to keep up with you. When your hand touches the dragon, no one can catch you. Jafer started to think further, saying that the only thing the teacher wasn't sure about was Ned. Disobeying orders, I got caught and summoned you here. The conditions for joining a raid group turned out to be much more dreary than he thought. Not liking complexity, I decided to take the easy way, Jafer said. In addition to everything, Jafer also wanted to tell Ned about bloody tears. Tears of blood are our family's stolen weapons. I follow the teacher in order to find him and take revenge on the temple. In the world only the Ned and the teacher know about it. He was surprised that Jafer had such information. Jafer said that the Kashta would understand that he could be trusted, then he would tell what he knew. So he offered to make life easier for each other. Jafer asked to be thrown into the raid group. Ned just couldn't believe he couldn't get his head around what Jafer was talking about. Ned said to follow him. He led him to an abandoned building, which was not far from the temple. Going into it there was a bunch of followers of the devil. Ned introduced Jafer as having been sent by the teacher to help. His personal data is verified according to the procedure. Jafer hoped for a distinctive member, and his hopes were not disappointed. And so the meeting began, where they discussed slave status raid party members who will follow the Heresy Inquisitors proxies and hunting party. The 40 people became followers of the devil. Page 5. Since we have a newcomer, I'll explain the raid tactics again. Kill yourself on the nose, mistakes are unacceptable. For the honor of the devilish cult. Jafer thought that by joining the raid with the help of a cult, he would be able to immediately recognize among the members of the group the lurking followers of the devil. He was so shocked that he couldn't laugh. They were completely different from the Sahak, who only relied on monster items. And from me that in a past life he put ambition in the first place. It was an elite army, each with their own special talent. Jafer could not understand why, then, with such power, to follow the devil. All the while, Ned replayed Jafer's words in his head. And at that time he reminded himself that he must not waver. For the sake of revenge, he needs the help of a teacher. Therefore, no matter what happens, he is obliged to steal the heart of the dragon and escape. Not a shadow student, but he. As a reserve student brought back to replace me, he may wish for me to embody in the dungeon. Because only after my death will he be recognized by the official followers. He had not yet thought that a shadow student could kill him, and he was very afraid of this. At the end of the meeting, the leader said that the explanation was over, and now they are divided into teams. A squad of defenders guard the Ned and secure the path of the route, and the strike squad takes over the commanders of the Knight Lucius. Ned turned to Jafer, since we are on the same mission, maybe we will become one team. Jafer was surprised. He remembered that a week from a past life was blinded by a sense of revenge and trusting the wrong person. As a result, he lost his life. By nature, he is loyal and patient. It is not needed for an enemy, but for an ally it can serve as a force. Jafer agreed to be on the same team. In a past life, many of his acquaintances tragically met their end. Therefore, the first person he returns will be Ned. Jafer remembered passages from the past. Either you learn the strongest martial arts technique and help me escape, or you immediately die and turn into a piece of meat. That was what the Ned from the past had told him. A mysterious connection that will make the strongest man out of Jafer. His teacher is Ned, who taught him the royal tiara flow technique. The following day, the list of participants in the dungeon raid of the tomb of the infamous princess was announced. The members of the raid group will meet tomorrow at 6 in the morning. And until the day I leave for the raid, I will live in a certain place and receive training to prepare for the raid. For safety, until the end of the raid, participants are prohibited from communicating with everyone except their team without permission. Everyone must take everything necessary and report in advance on the calculations. That's all. Jafer managed to get achievements for clearing the dungeons, as he promised the Goth. It's time to leave the hunters. They thanked Jafer for being on their team and helping them move up the rankings. They wished him luck on the raid. Jafer wished them good luck too, and that they did not relax and constantly trained. Constant training is the way to their success. Although we have not known each other for a long time, but during the time spent, I realized that this person has a goal. And this goal is so grandiose that simpletons like us cannot even imagine anything like that. Ned was proud of his team of hunters. 2 who should have died in the past are still alive. Seeing how their eyes were filled with energy, he knew that his actions were not in vain. But be that as it may, they can still be considered dead. If after 3 years the followers of the devil succeed in successfully performing the summoning ritual, then many people, including these guys, will go to the next world. In order to prevent that outcome, he must get the dragon's heart. After all, Zephyr came to the nun, she just got him armor. Said it was the best she could find. The nun found a blunt weapon, as Jafer asked, it passed mana well through itself. The tomb of the vile princess is a dungeon crawling with living skeletons, and because they have already died, they do not feel pain. And due to the fact that their bodies are made of strong bones, they are not affected by attacks like cut flesh. Inflict pain and drain stamina as a result of bleeding. The most correct thing is to destroy the skeletons with a blunt weapon. Even among the huge number of weapons, Jafer liked the sword the most. Long Sword of Sunset. A relic found by a knight 100 years ago in the Sunset Mansion. It emits unfamiliar energy. But the nun admitted that the long sword is not a very good choice for killing skeletons.